So, where did you go wrong? Today, we're going to talk about tips and tricks on how to motivate the unmotivated. Okay, so one of the biggest questions a new teacher, or any teacher for that matter, is how do I motivate the unmotivated? So, you want to be a teacher and you just built a lesson that you know is going to appeal to all your students and engage them. And you're so excited to provide this instruction to your students. But as you're teaching this lesson, you notice that one of your students in the back corner is just not focused, very disengaged, and somewhat distracted. So, where did you go wrong? Today, we're going to talk about tips and tricks on how to motivate the unmotivated. A couple of the biggest aspects of motivating the unmotivated. The first thing that you need to remember as a classroom teacher is the importance of relationships and really knowing your students and their needs. And this comes from time and this comes from observation. Take the time to watch your student early in the year and make notes of things that they commonly do, things that frustrate them, and things that disengage them. Get yourself a little index card notebook and put a student's name on the top of each index card. And then throughout the year, take notes of times in the day that they seem most engaged or times in the day that they seem very tired or disengaged. What happens when they hit that frustration level? That is going to be gold for you when you are trying to motivate. But let's go back to kind of that step one. If a student is unmotivated, the very first question that you need to ask yourself would be, are their basic needs being met? And that means, are they fed? Have they been sleeping okay? Do they have the food and the nutrition that they need, the proper hygiene that they need? This goes back all the way to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory and that idea that we go through 5 levels to really get that motivation for whatever learning and or other areas in life. And that very bottom level is meeting those basic needs. And when we can meet those basic needs, we have removed any unknowns when it comes to, is the student hungry or are they just not sleeping well? Are there additional stressors at home that might be affecting their learning? So when we know that those basic needs are being met, we can eliminate that as one of the reasons the student might be unmotivated. And again, this goes back to relationships. Have we done our part to build trust and build relationships? This is a sensitive topic, you guys. This is not easy to really tap into what is happening at the home that could be affecting how the student is performing or engaged in the classroom. So make these conversations that you're having very non-threatening. It could be pulling them up for 2 minutes every morning and starting out with, hey, you know what I had for breakfast today? I had my favorite, eggs and toast. And I love to put jelly on my toast. What'd you have for breakfast? These are very non-threatening questions that can really help you understand those basic needs of your student. Talk to them about their sleep. How'd you sleep last night? What time did you get in bed? Do you read a story before you go to bed? Get to know your students and take notes of these things so that you can make sure that you are eliminating any of the basic needs that might be distracting them from being. The next big motivator or lack thereof is going to be the learning preference of the student. And I use the word preference because everybody has a way they prefer to learn. That means that we need, again, to go back to that observation piece. Take the time to watch your student and what really gets them excited for learning. Do they like to be outside? Do they like to interact with others when they're learning? Do they like to engage in a little competition, maybe with a game or an incentive? The way that they prefer to learn, once embedded in your instruction, will increase your potential for motivation with learning. And again, this goes back to some of the early theories. This one with Howard Gardner and his theory of multiple intelligences that says that there are 9 different preferences or styles that people can and prefer to learn with. And being able to integrate all of those different styles in your learning will activate that engagement piece quicker for some students. Really taking that time to watch and monitor how they prefer to learn. For me, I like that kinesthetic. As you can see, talking with the hands, being able to explore hands-on learning is very motivating to me. Another area for me is that peer learning. I like to have conversations and continue to build on that learning with other people. When a lesson that I am being a part of, when I'm at conference learning, if I am in a classroom learning and somebody integrates learning that allows me to have hands-on experience and or I get to interact in groups with others, my level of motivation is going to increase. So being able to identify that is going to be a huge difference for your students' engagement. To that, the third big tip and trick is making that real world connection. The students have to understand, well, why is this important to me and what is it that I am learning? So you're going to go teach a lesson on money, coins in the early grade levels. And you can start your lesson by saying, today we're going to learn about coins. Remember, coins are something that tell us the value of money. Okay? You've told them what they're learning and you've told them what money is, but how does money connect to their life? You could open up your lesson to say, have you ever gone to the store with your mom and dad and you saw a chocolate bar that you had to have? So you go to your mom or your dad and you say, hey, can I please have that chocolate bar? And they say, well, that costs 75 cents. Do you have 75 cents? Bingo. All of a sudden, we have connected the importance of money to their everyday life. Let's go to our older students because they are some of the hardest to motivate. You are going to teach a lesson on a math lesson, and you are going to teach a lesson on inputs and outputs and the functions of things. And all of a sudden, you relate that to, let's say, a smoothie shop or something that they are familiar with. And you talk about or going to a frozen yogurt shop and you have different flavors, you have different toppings, and all of a sudden you start relating the input and the output into building a milkshake or building a protein shake and all of the steps that they have to go through using these different ingredients. Now you've made that real world connection to them, and that level of motivation increases because they see value in learning. So we've talked about meeting their basic needs and the importance of observing them. We've talked about learning preferences and making sure that we're connecting with how the student might prefer to learn. We talked about real world connections. Now we're going to talk about that growth mindset because at the end of the day, you are the biggest model for your students. And you have been in that position where there is something you are asked to do, whether it's in your teacher preparation program, you have to write another lesson plan and you've written 30 other lesson plans this semester and you think, not another lesson plan. Having that growth mindset and modeling that for your students can really be that catalyst that changes their motivation level. So instead of saying, I have to write another lesson plan, you can change that growth mindset to say, I get to write another lesson plan, and it's just one more opportunity for me to perfect how I design instruction that will teach the curriculum to my students and how I get to meet the needs of my different learners. This is so important because you are always going to have those students who don't want or don't think they need to learn something. And when you lose engagement from your students, it is really, really hard to get it back. So modeling for your students that, yeah, sometimes we have to do things that are not fun or not motivating, but we need to change that mindset to say, but I get to learn something that's going to help me, or I get to be a part of this group and we're going to be able to share information that we learned. That mindset changes and you may be able to increase engagement in that way. So modeling that growth mindset and the ability to represent motivation even when you're feeling unmotivated. And that final piece, the final tip to motivating, listen, every single student has to go through and learn the standards that are established throughout every state in the United States. Our kindergartners have to learn letters and sounds and numbers. Our first graders are learning how to turn that into reading. But we can find ways to motivate them with more of a fun, play-based, and engaging activity that could be the difference in their learning experience. So let me give you an example. I taught kindergarten for years and years. I love kindergarten. It is my heart. It is my soul. Kindergarten is a lot of, here is your letter, here is your sound, let's write the letter. Here is your letter, here is your sound, let's write the letter. That can get very routine for your kindergartners. So how do I change that to be motivating for them? Well, I bring games into the activity. I bring sensory into the activities. So a couple examples, some of my students' favorite activities, steal the bacon. If you don't remember this game, it is a game where you go outside and you find a field because you're going to run, and you line your students up into two lines facing each other. And in the middle of those two lines, I always use an eraser, but some sort of object. Then, because I was teaching letters, I would write all the capital letters on index cards, and I would hand those to the students on one side of the field. And then I'd write all the lowercase letters and hand them to the students on the other side. So you're going to have a capital A on this side and a lowercase a capital B and a lowercase b. And then I would stand in the middle and I would call out either a letter or a sound, depending on where we were at in the learning process. And if I said, if you're holding the sound that says B, those two students on each side of the line raced to the middle to try to pick up the object. Mine was an eraser that was in the middle. While they're running, everybody else in the line is saying the letter and the sound. B says B. B says B. Now I have engaged everybody in my class, but I have also informally assessed, do these students know this letter? Because if they don't, or a student in their line has to say, you're in the letter B, you run, I instantly can monitor that I need to support learning there. Another example, cakewalk. Easy. Write your letters out on big pieces of paper, put them in a circle. You can do this with musical chairs as well. Allow your students to find a letter around the circle, start the music. They're walking with the music. The music stops and you give a sound or you give a word, and the student that is on that letter gets to share. This is the letter B, and B starts the word ball. Now you are still ensuring that they know their letters, they know their sounds, but you are bringing the play into their learning experience. The other opportunities are sensory. Let them write in sand. Let them write in shaving cream. If they're in the upper grades, let them if they're writing an essay and maybe they're really struggling with writing at the moment, let them record their voice saying their essay and then listen to it back and then start working through that writing process. Find opportunities to bring that fun back into learning, and that will motivate the unmotivated. as I leave you today, and we've talked about 5 different ways to motivate the unmotivated, just remember relationships are at the core. Take the time to get to know your student, take the time to observe how they prefer to learn, what gets them excited for learning, and then do your best to interact and integrate that type of learning into your instruction. And that will motivate the unmotivated.